I'm Dara Regal. I'm the Internship and Career Consultant at the Fleischman Center for Career and Professional Development here on campus. Thank you for coming today to explore entrepreneurship. I hope today's events will help you gain a deeper understanding of the realities, both positive and negative, of starting your own business, organization, or any other type of project you embark on. While it can be daunting, running your own business or organization is one of the most satisfying ways to make an imprint on the world. Our first event today is an interactive conversation with Kunal Mehta, author of The Disruptors, Entrepreneurs and Their Escape from Corporate America. Kunal wrote The Disruptors when he left his job as an investment banker to explore entrepreneurship. He is currently a finance associate at Charity Water and the founder of Outpatient, a telemedical venture that will connect patients and physicians through a video conferencing business platform. For The Disruptors, Kunal has spoken with the founders and key business leads of companies like Pinterest, Foursquare, Venture for America, Feed Projects, Charity Water, and Voila to reveal the early failures and heartbreaks that successful entrepreneurs face. After Kunal's lecture, we will open the floor for your questions. Before we get started, I would like to thank the sponsors of today's events: the Fleischman Center for Career and Professional Development, the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Partnership located in the Center for Excellence, Harper Edge, CCPA's Office for Careers and International Programs, the Office of Alumni Affairs, and the Broome County IDA. Thank you also to Emmanuel Priest, Director of Public Affairs for Senator Tom Livitz, for joining us in support of today's events. Please join me in welcoming Kunal Mehta.
Thanks a lot. The applause might be a little premature, so wait to see what I say first. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming out and giving up a Friday afternoon for this. Before I go any further, I just want to thank Dara and the entire Career Services for putting together this event tonight. I know there's a ton of really interesting entrepreneurial and professional experiences in the crowd, so I'd rather keep this pretty informal and begin to open up for some discussion so I get a chance to learn from you all as well. As way of introduction, my name is Kunal Mehta. I'm a recovering investment banker, an author, and entrepreneur. 2 years ago, I left my job on Wall Street in search of some more entrepreneurial and inspiring work. And I hit some early heartbreaks and failures, but I've since bounced back. And I'm now the founder of a real estate venture in New York City. I'm working on a startup that will allow doctors and patients to video chat. And I'm also a finance and strategy associate at the nonprofit Charity Water that has provided clean and safe drinking water to over 5.2 million people worldwide. I think that's impact that really matters. I've been traveling across the country for about the last year, speaking with business school students in the undergraduate and graduate level. And what I've noticed is that many of us face a very interesting problem. And that problem is, do we pursue the high-profile, high-status, high-paying jobs that the JP Morgans, the McKinseys, the Goldman Sachs, the BCGs, that those offer, where status, reputation, and wealth is irrefutable? Or do you pursue something really far off the beaten path, and something that offers more in terms of career fulfillment and satisfaction? And it's a very interesting and tough decision that college graduates across the country are facing. And it's a decision that I'm hoping our conversations today and in the coming weeks, months, please stay in touch with me, will help make it a bit easier. And what helped me get through that decision was this understanding of what else was out there. And that understanding came through a series of conversations with some of the greatest entrepreneurs of our generation. And they're the founders of companies like Foursquare and Pinterest. And these conversations happen at very raw moments when, in a side that we've heard about so often, with an 18 or 19-year-old who just started building a company, stumbled on some venture success, got backed by some VC, and within a year was all of a sudden on the cover of big blogs and magazines and had a valuation of $1 billion on top of their head, and found that entrepreneurial fame that so many people crave. And it's a story that we've heard too often. It's a story that we talk about so often. And then those conversations also happen on the other side of the spectrum with someone in their late 30s or 40s who had been building for 7, 8, 9 years and never saw the same kind of success or fame, or really found the same kind of success with the venture that they were working on. But regardless of where they were on the spectrum, these men and women were building with a fire in their stomach and with inspiration, because they were building towards a product that they really thought would be disruptive. And these conversations were inspiring, and these conversations are something that I've published in a book titled Disruptors with the purpose to inspire more people to pursue work that they truly care about. And I've been on this book tour for the last year, and I've been working with a growing number of disenchanted consultants, lawyers, bankers, corporate escapees, and realizing that people want to do something different. They want to be someone different. They just don't know how or where to begin. And I can empathize with them because when I was 17, I was offered a full scholarship by JP Morgan to attend the NYU Stern School of Business. And at the time, Wall Street seemed like the ideal profession. Books like Buyer's Poker, movies like Boiler Room, today it's Wolf of Wall Street, make it seem like the greatest place where you have careers, you learn these transferable skills, you're making good money, it seems like an ideal career path that you can use as a bouncing off point. But reality slowly started to set in. At 19, I was one of the youngest investment bankers, and by 20, I realized just how much I hated it, and I wanted to do something different. And everywhere I was looking, there were people younger than myself who were having a real, actual, tangible impact and social impact with their mobile devices. They were changing the way that we interact with our devices or technologies or our healthcare, and creating products that really mattered, whereas I was doing this repeatable job every day that someone had done before me every single decade. And I wanted to do something different, I wanted to be someone different, but the problem is that when you're in these roles and you're wearing a suit to work every day, and your managers are telling you you're doing a good job, and they give you these good reviews, you start to build a false sense of confidence. And you think, because I'm talking this big talk with all these managers in Wall Street, I'm smart, and maybe this brilliance might translate into a different industry. And you start to think, because of those good reviews, and because of so many pats in the back, that I could succeed as an entrepreneur, maybe build something within 2 or 3 months, and eventually sell it for $1 billion, and then go and retire and do whatever. Which is a dream that so many people have. They think it's an overnight success metric. So in that overconfidence, I walked into my boss's office and I told him, I'm out, I want to do something different. And he understood. He had seen people like myself walk in there with this confidence, thinking that they were going to create a big entrepreneurial project. And in that same false sense of confidence, I walked out and I saw an empty canvas of everything I could build. And that confidence lasted a couple of days, weeks, and maybe a month. And then I started to realize that I had no idea what the hell I was actually doing. Everywhere I looked, I had mentors that were now, who I once respected, were looking at me and telling me, you quit your job during one of the greatest recessions our country's ever seen. That wasn't a great one. Your savings account is tested. And the resume that you've been building for the last 5 years was now meaningless. And slowly reality starts to set in that you're lost, and you have to start trying to find that direction. But what kept me going through it was the fact that there have been hundreds and hundreds of people before me that had gone through this. And there would be hundreds of people after me. And they would all be in a position of security to find work that they truly cared about. So what I wanted to understand is I wanted to sit down with these men and women, and I wanted to understand who were they when they began these ventures, and who were they through resilience and persistence eventually became the Scott Harrisons, and then the Hal Methas, and the Lauren Bush Laurens, and the Jack Dorseys, and Vin McConties, and Richard Bransons, and the other entrepreneurs that I speak with for Disruptors. But who were they when they were sitting in a room like this and facing early failures and criticism? And how do they bounce back from those? So when I finally sat down with them, I didn't focus on the press releases that we're so used to hearing. I didn't want to find that next TechCrunch or Forbes article. I wanted to get to the real candid stories about what did that first bankruptcy look like? Or how did you go from the classroom and thinking of that idea and developing it and working with programs? I thought those were the real lessons that we could use and build them on. So some interesting themes started coming out. And there's one idea that I want to share that I hope becomes the basis for a lot of what we do going forward. And it's this idea of embracing failure, realizing optionality, and thinking differently. So how many of you are familiar with a company called Spanx? It's called the women shape. Oh, it's the first time. But it's a shapewear and undergarment company created by Sarah Blakely. And she's one of the youngest females on the Forbes billionaire list. And what Sarah credits to her success was the fact that her father used to push her to fail when she was a child. And I thought that was a wild concept at first, that what kind of father would push his daughter to fail? But as we got further into the interview, what Sarah was saying was that every single night when they would sit down to dinner, Sarah's father would ask her, Sarah, what did you fail at today? And if she didn't have a good enough answer, she'd disappoint him. But what her father was trying to do, and what's interesting is that when we enter in these business programs and just the general way the career trajectory works is that you're building on a resume every single day, and you're afraid to operate outside of a structured career path. So what Sarah's father was trying to imprint in her mind from a young age was to think outside of that structured path that we operate in. Think in pockets of innovation where nobody else is thinking. Take those risks right now where the implications aren't so big, so you don't wake up 40 years later regretting it. And he got her to start thinking about these things, and she went through some interesting failures. I mean, if you pull up some of her interviews, and I know she acted as Mickey Mouse once in Disney for a couple of years to bounce back from some failures, and she's done some really wild things, but it eventually led to this product that she knew she would be content spending the next decade on. So you might look at me and say, okay, you're telling me to fail, and that's a wild concept, and it's a great idea, but realistically it's not possible. And that's something that I started going with that thought into Disruptors with. But when I spoke to these 25, 30 entrepreneurs, those failures kept coming up again and again as a recurring theme. So there's Kunal Mehta. I'm not sure if there's any other Indian males in the room, but he had the courage, and I can empathize with this, he had the courage to go to his family and say, I'm not going to become a doctor. And he said, I'm going to pursue something in business. So he got an offer from Goldman Sachs, and he was graduating from Wharton. And he also said, you know what, Goldman Sachs doesn't seem satisfying at the time, I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm sure to the core of my bones that I want to be an entrepreneur. So he graduated, he acquired $2 million in funding to begin this mobile venture, and began building on it, and saw some early successes. But within a year, the tech bubble crashed, and Kunal had to file for bankruptcy. So look around, and to the person next to you, and when you're first decide to start this venture, you put all this public relations into it. You're talking to everybody about this venture and hyping it up that you've just raised $2 million, and you're speaking about it everywhere, you're sharing it on the social websites, and it becomes the core of everything you do. And your reputation and your satisfaction is tied into it. Now, a year from now, you're going to those same people and telling them you filed for bankruptcy. That's a very, very raw moment that most 22, 23-year-old people, most logical people, would walk away from and say, you know what, I'm going to get a secure career done. Kunal did. He said, I know I'm going to be satisfied only as an entrepreneur, and no job will ever satisfy that, but I need to stick with it for a while. So he took some redeeming qualities out of that venture that he filed for bankruptcy for, began building it out again, and within 3 or 4 years sold that to Omnicom. Kunal has now built 4 other ventures that are very successful. He's a serial entrepreneur in New York, a philanthropist, and he just closed a $55 million funding round to invest in mobile startups. And the thing that he teaches all entrepreneurs, and the thing that he told me for the book also, is that you need to stick with this. This isn't an overnight success story. You need to be willing to give this 5 or 6 years if it's really something you're satisfied working. And it also happened with individuals in social impact. There was Andrew Yang, a corporate lawyer who graduated from Columbia Law School, who decided that he wants to set up a social venture as well. And I remember when we sat down for the book, it didn't work out. And a couple of months later, when we were sitting down, he said, Kunal, I had just sold all my furniture so I could keep myself afloat, and I was lying down on the floor wondering how I failed so miserably and so publicly. Because the failures in this space are very public. Sorry. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with a company called Charity Water, but that's where I've been working for about the last 2 years. And this idea of embracing failure, realizing optionality, and thinking differently is something that happens very often in social impact, because these are entrepreneurs that are dealing with these mammoth crises that some of the biggest NGOs haven't been able to solve. Charity Water has a very interesting story, but the founder of the company has a very diverse, different kind of background. He was a club promoter in New York City, doing all kinds of drugs, living life of vice. Bacardi and Budweiser were paying him to drink his alcohol publicly. And he had this cathartic moment of self-reflection where he said, I'm not leaving a legacy behind that I'm proud of. So like most people in that situation, he decided to move to Africa and work on a volunteer trip. He began working there, and he witnessed something that I just had the unique opportunity of seeing myself. When we went to Ethiopia, we went down, we were driving for miles, maybe 6 or 7 miles, through just complete barren land. And we hit this school where 700 students kind of congregate every day. And every morning they have to walk down to get their drinking water. And they walk down about a mile through some treacherous territory, and we follow them on this water walk. And when we get there, we hit this very narrow stream where 2 donkeys are defecating at the top. There's algae and moss in the water, there's tadpoles in it. And the woman that's collecting water is pouring it into a Tupperware container and pouring it into a larger bucket, but only using her dress as a filter. And that's something Scott witnessed when he was there, and it was a very real moment that was leading to, on this medical brigade ship that he was working for, it was leading to some of the flesh-eating diseases and the bacteria that we're seeing, and they were completely changing these lives with diarrhea and dysentery, keeping them out of schools. And Scott came back with this vision of providing clean and safe drinking water to all people in developing countries. So he came back, and as a young visionary entrepreneur, he had this idea of creating a nonprofit. And he had to embrace some early failures. So nonprofits, in a conventional way, where we look at them is they're black holes of funding. You put $1 in, you're not really sure about how much is actually going to people in need. Is it 20 cents, 30 cents? So Scott said this model is not going to work. People are not going to rally around that mission. So he flipped the entire nonprofit model on its head and said, we're going to give 100% public donations directly to the field. And he started to change the entire model, and now the entire nonprofit industry is moving that direction. And he said, we're going to build a private donation base that's going to cover the operations and the overhead costs. And then he revisited it and said, nonprofits usually feel guilty about telling the stories, and they feel guilty about branding. But he said, if we want to succeed as a nonprofit and a startup, we need to think about this from a technology perspective and brand ourselves the way Airbnb or Apple would. And these things have helped. And now in the past 8 years, they've served 5.2 million people in over 24 different countries by building over 15,000 work projects. And then again, I think that's impact that really matters when you're focusing on venture. I won't talk too much, but I just want to leave with one final thought. I think there's a sexiness and craziness around startups and entrepreneurship that's gotten a little bit disgusting. It's about who's on the cover of which magazine. It's what are you tweeting about? And it's not really about building real products. I've said this so often, is that everybody's calling themselves an entrepreneur now, even if they're just sitting in a bathtub waiting for that genius idea. And I think there's something interesting there, is that everybody, this sexiness and craziness around startups isn't about those big valuations. It's not about the cover of the magazine. It's not about how good your press releases are. I think it's more about the fact that these are men and women living life in their own terms, and they're building ventures that they truly care about and they're dedicating themselves to. And they're the ones that are having lasting impact, whatever industry that they work in or that they truly care about. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that from the panelists later on tonight. But again, I think it begins with this idea of embracing those early failures, realizing that you have options with your careers, and thinking differently about those ventures that you're eventually going to work on. Again, thank you so much, and open up to any questions, concerns, or disbeliefs. Thanks again.
So this is your opportunity to ask any questions that you would like of Kunal, and please, feel free to ask whoever you'd like.
Yeah.
How long did you work before you decided to break out?
So I was at JP Morgan for 4 years, and then I did another year and a half at Nomura. It was a Japanese bank.
Okay.
So I did it for quite a while. But the 4 years were during college, and a year and a half after.
And then do you think that do you think that you knew enough about yourself that you weren't going to be happy there, or was it not until you got there